Hello and welcome back to my remake of LEGO LOCO, a sandbox city builder from LEGO, released in 1998. Today I'm going to be implementing the inspect feature, tidy up a few things, and start to look at the final big feature that's currently missing, the trains. So let's get straight into it. So in LEGO LOCO, when you start to get your first citizens appearing, be that human, animal, or magic autonomous vehicle, you can inspect them to get a closer look by right-clicking on them. This brings up two things, a magnifying glass and a little pop-up menu that shows off their name and a nice detailed picture, or just a signpost if they're an animal. The magnifying glass, as you'd expect, magnifies the area around the character and gives you a better look. The pop-up menu has a field for their names which can be changed, and a picture that updates based on their minifigs emotions. So these are two elements I need to include that are mostly very simple. The only detailed part is getting a nice zoom feature in place. But from working with a feature like this previously, I know exactly how I'm going to do it. So let's move over to Unity and go into a bit more detail about it. So first I want to quickly show you the files that I have in the project and how the original was structured. So there's a bunch of .dat and .but files in here that probably had some stuff in there that was useful to the game, like metadata, but honestly I have no idea what these do. In the magnifying glass folder, there's more of these random files, and then there's the glass sprite and the handles. The handle comes in both left and right-handed versions, because depending on the position, it needs to flip left or right so that it doesn't stick out past the edge of the screen. The sprites have the usual pink background, but the magnifying glass's center is green, and I imagine what they did here is somewhat similar to the approach I am going to take. Basically, you create a second camera that's zoomed into the area, and take that output and apply it to a texture. That texture is then displayed in the middle of the magnifying glass, and it looks like it is zooming in. This is how a lot of games handle scopes for guns or TV screens and other displays. It's just a different camera's perspective. First, I created a new parent object for all of this to live on called the inspector. This will hold and control both the magnifying glass and the inspector window, and I'm going to start with the magnifying glass. I added another blank object and added the images for the frame and both handles. To swap between left and right, I can just enable one and disable the other, but the frame also has this little bit at the edge which connects to the handle, so when I do that switch, I need to flip the frame sprite. The easiest way to do that is just to rotate it 180 degrees on the y-axis, and problem solved. And then comes the slightly trickier part, the zoom feature. I've created a new camera here, and this is what the magnifier is going to see. And at the bottom, instead of this being output to the display, in this field I can set a texture for it to be rendered to. Here, I've got a new render texture with everything on the default settings, except I changed the filter mode to point, so there's not any weird compression. I then need to apply this to an object, and I'm just going to use a raw image component, which allows me to provide a texture instead of a sprite. So now, this displays what the camera sees in game, but then there's the issue of this texture being square, while the magnifying glass is obviously round, which means that I have to mask this texture. So all I did was create a simple mask in Paint that's just the transparent gap in the middle of the glass, and added this to the object, gave it a mask component, and then moved the texture object to this one as a child. This cuts off all the corners around the frame and displays the magnified image perfectly in the center, and is basically all done. I now need to program all the functionality surrounding it, like the buttons, making it follow the minifig around, stuff like that. So I created a new script for the inspector, and I set up the references for everything that it needs to know about. The first thing I added was to move the camera to follow the minifig that it's inspecting. As this isn't a Cinemachine camera, I can't just assign a follow target, so instead I used a simple fast lerp to keep it centered. So now you can see a close-up of the minifig as it wanders about, but the magnifying glass isn't moving. So now I need to set its position in the canvas relative to the world space of the camera. This is a pretty simple addition, and now it works just like it does in game. The next step is to get the functionality in for the buttons. So the first one is the X, which simply closes the inspection, and the second one, the question mark, toggles the inspector window. So I made a blank version of the window, and that functionality took me literally 5 minutes to hook up completely. Here, once again, I ran into the issue of not actually having the sprites available for every single UI element, because I don't have these super wide buttons. So I just use the normal ones as placeholders, and I'll have to make these myself. And finally, now that a lot of the inspector functionality is in, I need to actually be able to select a minifig and load their relevant data into the windows. In the player selection controller that I made right at the start of the game, I added new functionality for the right click, which uses a collider overlap on the ground, checks for any possible unit, and if one is found, it passes that unit through to the inspector to activate. To be able to actually hit a unit, I had to add a collider to them, but this was a lot easier than the buildings as the minifigs are all the same size. So now, when you right click, it does an overlap check, and if it returns a result, an event is called that sends that unit onto the inspector. Here, it sets the follow target to the unit's transform, calls the setup function for the inspector window, toggles the game object on, and then also calls an event which closes the toy box, just so there's not two things going on at once. In the inspector window, it stores the current unit, sets the text to the unit's name, and gets the detailed sprite. To do all of this, I had to refactor some of the unit code, because when I initially wrote it, I had the minifigs, animals, and cars as 3 separate classes, and only introduced the base unit class afterwards. So what I had to do was rewrite and refactor a lot of their code, and move all of the common features like their name, state, animations, pathfinding, all of that down to unit, and then make these subsequent classes a child of this base one. But then I ran into another issue, which was that I need to pull the scriptable object from the unit class, and again, all of the data is actually the same between the different types. They all need sprites, types, animation controllers, a collection of names, and all of it. And so, I ended up creating a base unit scriptable object as well, and moved all of this data in there. And to be honest, all of the subclasses, so minifig SO, animal SO, and vehicle SO, are all completely useless now, and I can get rid of them. The only reason I haven't done that is because I do not want to fill out these data files again, so they can just all stay. I did have to redo the list of names available to each unit, which was a pain, so you've probably seen some gameplay in this video where everyone is called Greg, but I eventually got it all done. But hey, if you'd like to get involved, leave a comment down below with some names for the different types of minifigs, and I'll be sure to add them to the list. Once I was happy with how the minifig inspector was going, I started to spawn some animals, which I realized wasn't actually possible before, but with the addition of the new unit SO class, I added these to the fields, ponds, and fountains. And once they were spawning in, I made sure that the inspector works with them as well, and it looks amazing, with a simple signpost appearing just like that. And I did the same thing for the cars, so now they spawn in from the garages. So I can now interact with all of the inhabitants in the city, but in the game you can also inspect the buildings. So I need to add that. When you click on a building, it brings up a window exactly like the minifig, with the name and the picture. But when you click the question mark to bring up the full menu, you don't see a list of all available buildings, but instead you see a list of all minifigs that spawned from that building. This only works for the ones that actually have spawns, obviously, and only some buildings can be inspected to begin with. So I need a way to determine whether or not a building could be inspected, and then try to load the spawn pool. Luckily, I already tracked the list of spawned units from each building in its own list, so that's no problem. And so, when I right click a building, it brings up the inspector, and I can see which minifigs spawn from there. One problem I was having though was that the inspector would pull the list from the building, but when you click on the names in the list, it actually gets the unit from the list of all available units, not just the one from the building. So I had to change the code a bit to get the correct result. And to finish up this video, I'm going to set up the inspector UI for the trains. So I started by creating blank objects so I can enable and disable all of the relevant UI at once. And I need this because the train UI is slightly different. Instead of having an inspect sprite, the trains have this dial for their speed control, as well as the buttons below it to go forward, backwards, or stop. These two control the exact same thing, but I guess they wanted clearer controls. I made a basic layout with shapes to define these parts, as yet again I do not have the sprites for the bottom buttons, only the dial. I made invisible buttons on the dial, one for each direction, so that you can still click on that. All of this functionality will converge into a single value in the train controls script, and then when I get the trains in place, this value will be passed on to that. So the speed value starts at 0 when it's stopped. Clicking the sides of the dial, all the arrows at the bottom will adjust the speed in that direction by 1. So left will be -1 and right will be +1. And if you click the train in the middle, it sets it to 0, stopping it completely. The dial simply needs to pick the relevant sprite based on the speed it's going, and it's all good to go. The large inspect window again shows a list of minifigs, and this time it shows all of the minifigs that are currently on board the train. So when that is in place, I'll need to pull this list from the train controller. The final difference that the trains have is this button here on the magnifying glass, this red one that looks like a crosshair, which is kind of weird to have in a LEGO game, but basically all this does is remove the train completely, and any minifigs that were inside it are reset to their spawn building. And the last part is the train depot menu. This will be another layer inside the inspector window and needs a few new buttons and features. What I decided to do was break apart the inspector into different menus, with the normal one being for most objects, and then a separate one altogether for the depot, and similar interactions still to come, instead of just swapping around the individual elements that it needs. So in this one, there are a few tabs. The first is very similar to the normal window, except on the right it has the 4 buttons for building a train, editing one, clearing the current train that's in the depot, and sending the train out onto the tracks. And once more, I do not have these sprites with buttons, which is just brilliant. So for now, they're generic UI blobs. When you click the top left button, that being the train maker one, it opens up the train creation screen. And guess what? I don't have all the sprites to this screen either. Luckily though, while filming this exact footage for this video, I stumbled upon this, which is the full menu in a single image. Except this isn't right, this must be an old version of the builder, because it's missing buttons, has a name bar for some reason, and yeah, just isn't that usable. Fortunately for me, I found the lever sprites in the same place, which means it's absolutely fine, but I'm going to have to either find the missing sprites elsewhere, or make them myself. I set up an animation for the lever, and now when it's pulled, it randomly cycles through train cars and settles on one. While it's randomizing, it's just picking one from a list, but when it stops, I made sure that it picks a train that makes sense, so the length is generated and it picks that many cars with no gaps in the middle. At the moment, when you click the create button, all this does is prints out the indexes for each car in the console, but these values will eventually be used to build the actual train. And it's looking pretty good already. So now I've built the basics for the depot UI, a good amount of the navigation, functionality is there, and the next thing is to start getting the trains into the game. But that's going to have to wait until next time. I'll try to either find or remake the sprites that I'm currently missing in time for the next devlog and complete the look of the menu, but for now, let's round it out with everyone's favourite, subscriber wars. So let's throw it over to the arena. And here we go. All of the contestants are in the arena ready to fight, so let's get it started. Already a lot of competitors are going down, fighting in this middle area. I can see a few VIPs in there like Mark Davis and Hannah OX, both winning their individual fights. Minimus is hanging on at the top. Mr. Fox is surely going to come in and take him out, but Minimus did do a lot of damage there, so fair play to him. We're down to the final few here, and it looks like TZ Scion is going to take the win with the health advantage, and here we go. Takes down GD Snap for the victory. TZ Scion is the winner. And that's going to do for today. Congratulations again to TZ Zion for that win. Thanks very much for watching. This game is getting closer and closer to completion, and I am very excited to have a full, faithful remake of this classic game. Don't forget to leave a comment down below with the names you want to see in the game. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon for updates between videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.